All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Beyond Student Affairs, Careers in Higher Education. My name is Samantha Bruno. I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Career Services. I'm here with my colleague, Suzanne Grossman, and we're doing this event in partnership with the HEA program, so really happy to also have HEA Faculty Director, Scott Evanbeck. So today you'll be hearing from a panel of 4 HEA alums, which I'm super excited as an HEA alum myself. So briefly, I'll just tell you who's here on our panel. We have Gary Aguayo, Academic Program Manager and Assistant Director of SEEK at CUNY Queens College. L. Hazel Jack, Vice President for University Outreach and Chief of Staff to the President at Colgate University. We have Andrew Lane, Director of Major Gifts, Colleges of Arts and Sciences at the University of Vermont Foundation, and Michelle Vackman, Executive Director of Admissions Operations at Columbia School of Professional Studies. So at this time, I'll pass it on to our Dean, Sherry Ryan, to make a few remarks before we get started.
Thank you so much, Samantha. It's great to be here again. My name is Sherry Ryan. I'm the Dean of the Marxe School. It's wonderful to see so many people participating in this excellent event. I'd like to thank our fantastic Career Services and Alumni Relations staff, Suzanne and Sam, for helping to organize this. I would like to extend a sincere thank you to the panelists. I realize you are all very busy people in your work lives, and we really deeply appreciate your spending the time to share your experiences with our students and with others who might be on the call. I would say that the degree in higher education administration is one of our most specialized and specific degree programs, preparing students for a truly a specialized career, very applied, and all the more reason for them to really hear from practitioners, people working in the field. It is so important, and we so appreciate you coming back to the Marxe School. Deeply appreciate that. To share your experiences with our students so that they really can develop a full understanding. There's only so much you can learn in the classroom. I think these kinds of events really help our students, so we thank you for that. And I would just also like to thank our fabulous higher education administration faculty, Ryan, Scott, Ashley, Gaskew. I don't believe Casey's in the room, but thank you for all the work you do in preparing our students. So with that, I will turn it over to Ryan, who will be moderating. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Sherry. It's wonderful to see everybody this evening. I also just want to extend my gratitude to Sam and Suzanne as well. A lot of work goes into putting an event together like this, and I'm so grateful for all they've done for tonight. And I know that our panelists are going to share some incredible insight over the course of the evening. I will extend a pre-gratitude now, and thank you all for being here, and share some additional gratitude after we hear from you all tonight. So as you all know, this evening's event is titled Beyond Student Affairs, Careers in Higher Education. Our Higher Education Administration program, in conjunction with our Career Services Office, recognize that many of our grad students enter the Marxe School either as administrators working in student affairs or as people envisioning a career back in student affairs once they're done. But tonight we wanted to go in a different direction and highlight careers that go beyond student affairs. So not only are there countless career pathways beyond student affairs that support student success, but there are also critical roles in higher education that support other functions of colleges and universities. While I believe colleges and universities must always maintain a student-first mission, I also believe we must recognize that our institutions play a number of other critical roles. To name a few, colleges and universities are responsible for developing new knowledge through research, solving key challenges in our society through sharing our expertise with other sectors, and supporting democracy through upholding shared governance and preparing informed citizens to think critically. So with this in mind, I want us to turn to tonight's panel discussion and focus our attention both on work that takes place beyond student affairs and the ways in which that work ultimately serves individual students and our society more broadly. So By way of introduction tonight, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to walk us through your individual career paths, starting with your undergraduate education and leading to your current roles. And so whoever would like to go first can jump on in.
I can start.
Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Backman. I'm, as we said, the Executive Director of Admissions Operations at Columbia School of Professional Studies. I started off with an undergrad in psychology at Brandeis University. I was convinced I was going into market research, so I was psych major, business minor, and I was also a tour guide as an undergrad. I had really changed my mind about where I wanted to go to college based on my tour guide or based on going on a campus tour. So started getting involved with being a tour guide, ran the tour guide volunteer program, graduated. Okay, great. I'm going to business school. I'm going to figure out my life. I need work experience to go to business school. Okay, now what? So my mom had pulled an ad out of Newsday and said, here, this is kind of what you were doing when you were an undergrad. You should apply to this. I applied. It was a position in event planning to support an admissions office at Adelphi. Applied, got the job, thus started my career. I've done a little bit of everything, so I've bounced around between a number of different universities, but always with or around admissions. So I've done undergraduate recruiting locally. I've done graduate recruiting both locally and internationally. I've worked with international students issuing I-20s and doing visa processing. I've done academic advising. I've worked with now 2 different CRM systems. So getting applications built, figuring out what is the best way to get a student to apply, information that we need versus information that a student has easy access to, and trying to make the process the smoothest for everybody involved. And so I've kind of moved through all the different areas that I possibly could within admissions. And now I'm really looking forward to talking to you all, answering questions, and seeing how admissions could potentially be a good fit for you. One thing to think about is I was never a student affairs person. I like being back end. I talk to students, I can get on a stage, I can perform, I can do whatever I need to, but I'm an introvert. Where I am now, admissions is actually part of student affairs. So just because you may not want to be front and center, student affairs, depending on the university, can incorporate so many things other than working directly one-on-one with current students.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I'll pass the baton to whoever ready. Gary, you look like you're unmuted. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, that's quite all right. My name is Gary Aguayo. I'm the academic program manager and assistant director of the SEEK program at Queens College. I started my undergraduate career, actually, I wanted to be a civil engineer. That's what I really wanted to do. And then eventually that didn't pan out. I didn't do really well in physics, and that's a necessity to be a civil engineer. So then I took an elective class in economics and political science, and that led me on to get my undergraduate degree eventually in econ and political science. During that time, I worked as a research associate for the Buildner Center for Western Hemisphere Studies, which is now located at the Graduate Center. And I also worked, prior to that, I worked also as a tutor during undergrad. Regarding what led me to this career path, then from there, I worked at Puerto Rico College as an instructor. That's where I had that. So I was actually mostly academic, but then I had this inkling from just speaking to students that I needed to get involved in not just the academic part, but something more student affair, more in the lines of student affairs. And what I currently do right now, it bridges both, because I am an academic program manager, but I deal with a lot of other things as well. The program actually has different segments. There are some students in the program that actually live on campus at the summit, so I have to serve as a liaison with the summit. So I guess my career my current job description is a little bit, it falls into different branches and different hats. And I guess we'll get into that further on into the conversation. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks so much, Gary. Hazel, why don't I pass it up to you?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here with you all. I did not know that I was going into higher education. The irony of it, when I was applying for college, I thought I either wanted to go into education to be a teacher or I wanted to do marketing. And I got a scholarship to go to to go to Pace. I went to Pace for undergrad. For marketing, and I was like, oh, decision made. First gen college student, no idea about anything. I just knew I had to go and get out, right? I had to do it. So I came out of undergrad. I was in corporate comms. I went back to Baruch and got an MBA, was doing advertising, marketing, etc. And about 10 years, I was like, is this really it? Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? The irony, I was working for an airport advertising company for 9/11, whole nother story we could talk about another time. But, in that moment, I was thinking I wanted to make a shift. And I saw a position for a marketing director at City University. They were School of Professional Studies. They had just opened the school. I think there were 6 employees at the time. I remember the interview with the dean. He said, "You've never worked in higher ed. Why on earth would I hire you?" But he did, and it was great. And just, continued moving from there. This is my 4th institution. I'm now at Colgate, Vice President of University Outreach and Chief of Staff to the President. I can talk about whatever that actually means later. And I'm actually also a doctoral student at Syracuse, writing my dissertation now. So hopefully soon that will be done. But that's kind of how I found my way here, and look forward to talking to you all more.
Thanks so much, Hazel. And last but not least, Andrew.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. So I went to undergrad at Hamilton College, just up the road from Colgate University. And I was a very sort of active and engaged student on campus, in admission, doing sort of alumni phone-a-thon kinds of roles in development. And then my campus job, federal work study job, was actually in the office of the president. So I got to see a lot of how college and university, or college in the case of Hamilton, governance actually happened, especially in partnership with the Board of Trustees. And I fell in love with it, and frankly thought that I was ready to embark on a career in higher ed. Had job offers from both, entry-level job offers from both the Hamilton admission office and the development office, but was in a ton of student debt, and higher ed would not have paid me, frankly, enough to live on and make my loan payments. So instead, I took a very sharp turn and landed on Wall Street and did a management training program having nothing to do with higher education, and really didn't love it, but it did pay the bills. And I was able to transition after the training program into the philanthropy unit within the bank. And I stayed in financial services doing work in and around philanthropy for a decade in New York City, and then left and went to work for one very wealthy family to run their philanthropy for another decade. But similarly to Hazel, I had this kind of moment of thinking, like, is this all there is? Is this what there is? And so I went back to grad school, went to Baruch part-time in the evenings, and got my master's in 2015, knowing that that calling that I had felt all of those years ago was still there, and needed to figure out a way to transition into the field, incorporating 20 years of experience in philanthropy by that point. So actually during the pandemic, I kind of decided I was ready for a change from New York City and moved to the beautiful Green Mountain state of Vermont, and took a job as Vice President for Alumni Relations and Development at Vermont Law and Graduate School, overseeing all of the fundraising and alumni engagement functions. And then after a period of time there, moved on to the University of Vermont, where I now direct major gifts for the College of Arts and Sciences. I also am a doctoral student in the Education Leadership and Policy Studies program at the university. So again, great to be here and super excited to talk about career paths.
Thank you so much, Andrew. You know, I think what's really standing out to me already is that each of you is explaining a why behind this, right? A way in which you were drawn into this field. And I want to dig more at that, right? There's something, there's a passion, there's a reason we're doing this work. There's a drive to be part of this. And so I'm going to just, and I'll start with you, Michelle, so that we can sort of go back in order. But I just want to know why you chose to work in the field, if there's more that you want to share back there, and then also what keeps you in the field. I feel like those two might be work together. So
Yeah, I think that the area of higher ed that I ended up in admissions really brings together everything that I thought I wanted to do in the real world. It's psychology. It's, if I wanted to think about market research, survey design. What's an application? A survey. What is enrollment? It's predicting marketing. It's thinking about who is going to buy your product. Students from the non-student affairs end of things, we could think of them as the product, as the client, as the customer. So being able to bring in all of the things from the quote unquote real world, from the business world, but also remembering that these are people, these are students, and everything's a little bit softer because we are working with underserved populations. We're working with people who are first gen. We're working with people who don't know what college is potentially, or we're working with people who have this idea of what college is in their minds. And then they come and they talk to a staff member and they realize that they want something completely different. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. Did I do that? No. But college gave me that opportunity, and having conversations with students, I've been able to see that light bulb go off. I remember distinctly when I was working at Hofstra a number of years ago, talking to a student who she said this is what she was supposed to do. And I said, but what do you want to do? And she was saying, yeah, well, my parents want me to do this because it'll make money, I'll make money and I'll pay off my debts and whatnot. And I said, okay, but what if you don't get that job to pay off the student loans? Is this the right path for you? Or maybe you don't go to school until you make sure that that's the right thing for you. So it's not just having a conversation of where is the right fit, but is this the right thing for you? And being able to have those real conversations and make changes to people's lives while at the same time doing all the stuff that I thought I was going to do out in the business world.
thanks so much, Michelle. I can certainly relate to that experience on my own journey and the ways in which your students' journey with their parents overlaps with mine in many ways. When I told my mom I was going into education, she almost lost her mind. So Gary, why don't I pass it over to you and hear a bit more about your why?
Okay. Yeah, my why actually, I wanted at one point in time to be a college professor, and I was actually geared towards academics. But then what actually led me to concentrate on what I'm doing now is just I'm first generation. My parents were low income, so I would have qualified for the program that I actually helping to direct. So the other reason, reason why is also because I believe that this is a calling for me, and also it serves the greatest number of students. If you're an instructor or professor, you have what, 25, unless you have a jumbo class. But most of the time you have about 25 students. So 25 times 3, that's 75. Here in the program that I oversee, we have 1,000 students. So not that I service all 1,000, but I I see pretty much, I get to know all of them during the time that they're here. Most of them, on average, are here 4 or 5 years. And what keeps me here is actually just looking at them when they graduate, and just the alumni that return. And here at Queens College, we graduate our students outside on the quad, weather permitting. So it's always nice to see them actually come through the quad. And my office is right adjacent to the quad. And they also stop in during graduation. Their parents are also stopping as well. So it's not only students, but the alumni, they come back, and a lot of them give back in different ways. Some offer to tutor, to serve as mentors. So those are all things that actually keep me here. And I'm happy knowing that I'm making the greatest difference for the greatest number of individuals. So that's the reason for me here in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Gary. I appreciate that. Hazel.
Yeah, I think I alluded to it before, just kind of that moment where it felt like, is this really, what I'm going to do for however many years I'm going to have to work before I can retire, right? And it felt like transitioning my skill set out of corporate into higher ed was, it just seemed like I was using what I knew and what I was trained to do in a way that benefits society more, not to sound all, but it felt like it had more meaning, and that it was like there was a purpose behind it. And I didn't mention it, but at the point that I started working at CUNY, that was when I enrolled in the higher ed program at Baruch, because I quickly realized the naive perception of, it's everyone working for the greater good, that wasn't actually the environment that I walked into. Obviously, we do all believe in the mission of higher ed, but it wasn't as utopian and rainbows and unicorns as I thought it was going to be coming from corporate. So, having the experience in the higher ed program was really beneficial for me to then realize that communication, while it is a role within the higher ed landscape and a career path, it was just one of many opportunities. And, basically every field that you find outside of higher ed is in some form or fashion, within the university setting as well. So just fell in love with it and never left.
Thanks so much, Hazel. And Andrew, you already said quite a bit, but I'm excited to hear a bit more on your why too.
Yeah, so I mean, the simple reason is that college changed my life. I grew up in a very rural part of New York State. My dad was a public school teacher. My mom was a nurse. And Hamilton transformed the way I understood the world and understood myself and my role in that world. So I got bitten by the bug, as we talked about. And I just have always been really fascinated with these kind of the organism of the college or the university, the somewhat kind of closed and cloistered community that is created by these places, however many thousand of them there are in this country. And, the opportunity to help ensure that students have the kind of life-changing experience that I had, hopefully without as much debt at the end, it was just very compelling to me.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, that's one of our goals here at CUNY, is to have as little debt as possible. Although I will say, as students in our intro class studied a few weeks ago, and got quite upset about the fact that a couple or just a short generation or two ago, it was totally free for CUNY students. So yeah, but another topic for another day. So I wanted to sort of turn to the meat of our conversation today, and really why we're bringing together this particular panel of folks. And so, as I noted in my opening remarks, many of the people entering our graduate program work in student affairs and envision a career in student affairs. And I also want to emphasize that our grad program takes great pride in nurturing a student-centered vision of higher education, and that when I speak about student affairs, I'm speaking directly about the division of student affairs, not the fact that pretty much all of our work touches upon the lives of students in some way, shape, or form. But most of our panel works beyond student affairs tonight. Gary, you're the only person who actually sort of works directly in student affairs to some degree. So I want to start off with you and ask you to talk about how you collaborate with and rely on other higher ed administrators who work outside of the student affairs division.
Yeah, I collaborate with on different spheres, I guess. The department chairs, I have to. One of the things that we do here at the SEEK program is that we do have SEEK sections for certain courses. So Sociology 101, there's a SEEK section for that. So it's actually getting together a schedule of courses, making sure that the instructors are on board. Also, regarding enrollment, we actually work on the vice president for student affairs and enrollment management. So just making sure that we look at the data, enrollment data, especially to make sure that our courses stay open, or we could project that there will be enough enrollment for these courses. And also working with the provost office, specifically for students that are at risk, students that are doing poorly, and also using the student management system, EAB Navigate, which is the one we currently use, which identifies students. And we're also working with the instructors. So I actually send out progress reports, and they come in back as cases. So therefore, at that juncture, I'm able to reach out to students or reach out to their counselors. So those are things that ways that I work with other programs. I also work with the grant office because there are grants that the SEEK program actually has in place, financial aid as well, bursar. Even though SEEK students, by and large, they're low income, but some of them actually their salaries increase while they're here. So sometimes they're actually a little bit above for 100% financial aid, so they won't receive it. So actually getting in touch with bursar, making sure that the holds are on when they need to be on, and they're taken off, I guess, digitally, so they could actually program plan for next semester. So it's a lot of working with a lot of different folks in the administration. One thing that has helped a lot is actually, and I know Michelle spoke about this earlier, about the surveys, conducting surveys, because there you get the voice of the students. And this was actually pivotal during COVID, because we found out that about 85% of our students did not have Wi-Fi at home. So therefore, reached out to the provost, and the provost was able to get our students hotspots. Because a lot of them are actually using their cell phones to take quizzes, which is not the best way to take a quiz. So yeah, using of data was important as well, and presenting this data, working with actually Office of Institutional Effectiveness for gathering data, getting data from them, and actually giving them data as well regarding students graduating, students graduating within 6 years, graduating within 5 years. So it's just working with a lot of different folks. I think that we have to learn to build bridges. And I think that that's something that I think we're always working on, because we tend to work in spheres, in silos by and large, and this has been often been said, but it's just reaching out to people, and it's actually a good way to just small talk, or that elevator pitch will help. It does help a lot. And the program has helped me a lot. I'm a graduate from 2 years ago, so I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. You know, what you just described really just reminds me. Andrew, a little while ago, described higher ed as an organism. And there's all kinds of ways for us to think about this complex structure that we're all working within. Actually, a lot of the students who are here tonight are in an introduction to higher education class right now, and they're all in the midst of doing a project called their Roles and Responsibilities Project, where they are conducting an interview with somebody who holds a role somewhere in higher ed that is some role that they just aren't familiar with. And it's a fascinating time for folks to really start building those connections and realizing just how challenging it is to navigate this space. And as you said, Gary, to build those bridges so that you can actually succeed in making this organism function well.
And
yeah.
I'm curious, how many folks, and maybe we can use Zoom hands, are in student affairs now? Or just one?
Oh, they'll come up.
Okay. No, I was just curious, like what the composition looks like. So, okay, it's quite a few.
Yeah, there are students who are holding other roles in places like admissions too, but you know, I think that a lot of the orientation often is towards student affairs here.
Sure. Thank you.
So I guess that sort of transitions us to Hazel, Andrew, and Michelle. You know, as professionals who hold positions of leadership beyond student affairs, I'd like to ask each of you to share your reflections on how your work contributes to the missions of each of your institutions, and also how your work relates to student success. So maybe Hazel, you can start us off since you were just.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I think when we were talking before the panel, Andrew, made the good point about everything we do is for the benefit of students, and I completely agree. I mean, I don't think you should be working in higher ed. I feel very strongly, actually, that you shouldn't be working in higher ed if you don't have the best interest of students. And you'll see that happen at times, right? Like, let's just be honest. But I think every role directly and indirectly touches. I mean, you can go down to the tactical pieces of, during COVID, communications was suddenly one of the most important functions as it related to students and student well-being. I was responsible to send a message every day at 5 o'clock. So Colgate, sorry, backtrack really quickly. Colgate sent everyone home. We're a residential liberal arts college in upstate New York. As a New York City person, I thought everything above Westchester was upstate, but come to find out there are multiple regions. We're in central New York. We sent everyone home and then talked about what are we going to do for the fall. And we brought every one of our 3,000 students back and had them quarantine in their rooms for 17 days. They were only let out for yard time, which we would jokingly call it, their outdoor time, and to get tested within those 17 days. And for that entire semester, every day at 5 o'clock, I had to send a message to them to say where we were in terms of infection rates, what were the protocols, what needed to happen that week, when the next testing cycle was going to take place, what was happening with courses. I mean, it was tons of people working, but ultimately communication had to, relay this message to students in a way that they could digest and not freak out. I mean, let's be honest, especially at the beginning, we really didn't know what was happening. So I think that was a really macro time where you see the impact that non-student affairs, pieces have. But, I would also say finance, right? Andrew talked about working in the finance sector. We have a CFO who watches our investments. And because our endowment was doing so well, we could afford to bring everyone back. We could afford to not lay staff off. We could afford, at that point, testing was incredibly expensive, right? We could afford all of these mechanisms in order to keep running. Right. So if we didn't have the finances to do that, would have been we sent to Gary's point, we sent laptops internationally because students didn't have what they needed at home to do their coursework. Right. So, yeah, I mean, you're in finance, but without that, we can't support our students, right? So I think, whether it's fundraising, IT, communication, et cetera, all of our work ultimately is impacting the experience and ability to be successful.
Thank you, Hazel. Andrew and Michelle, I don't know, maybe Andrew would be worth jumping in since there was a lot of conversation around finance right there.
Sure thing. So I work for the UVM Foundation, which is the the fundraising and alumni arm of the University of Vermont. And what that means is that we're charged with raising roughly 75 million in new philanthropic commitments each year to support the university and its programs. And we also manage relationships with the 125,000 living catamounts. The catamount is our mascot, the cousin of the bear cat. So I, in particular, am focused on supporting the College of Arts and Sciences, which is the largest academic unit. And I am every day engaging with prospects and donors, most of whom are alumni, so former students, about student support. And often that takes the form of scholarships. That also increasingly is a focus on raising flexible dollars to support experiential learning. So this is unpaid and underpaid internships and other opportunities to give students practical experience and to pay them for it. Interesting study away experiences that broaden students' horizons, etc., and the ability for students to do original research in partnership with faculty. So it's a very student focus in the conversations that I'm having and the way that I'm engaging. The other piece of it, though, and the sort of pitch that I would make around this kind of work is that we get to work with alumni, and my colleagues who are in alumni relations and alumni engagement really are in student affairs roles, but focus on folks who have graduated, right? And nurturing and sustaining the relationship that those individuals have from the point of commencement really for the balance of their lives. And so I really enjoy the ability to engage with people, yes, around fundraising, but also really around the kind of programming that will keep people engaged in the community and a part of the organism, so to speak, to extend that metaphor. And then I'll just sort of put in a plug that kind of builds off Hazel's comment. You know, from the perspective of a professional in higher ed, I want to work with really smart colleagues in all of the various functional areas. So that means that I want colleagues who have thought critically about higher ed in admission, in finance, in communication, in any of the various sort of supporting roles, because it elevates everybody's game to have folks who really care about the place that they're working for and the enterprise that they're engaged in. So yeah, I would leave it there.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Maybe we should change the title of your office to the Office of Former Student Affairs so that it can still be student affairs there. You know, I think I'm joking, but right, like at the core, what we're hearing from everyone is that students are the center of the work that's taking place in all of these roles, regardless if it's labeled student affairs or not. And so, yeah, Michelle, I wonder if you can add your perspective on this in terms of how you support the mission and directly support student success.
Sure. We're the entry point to the university existing. Admissions, without an admissions team, students may not find the school, students may not complete an application. If we have no students, or if we have applications, they may need the nudge to actually take the next step to enroll. If we don't have enrollees, then nobody else has jobs. So we, in the admissions office, really drive what happens with the rest of the university. If we get directives that we want more of a certain type of student, that's on us to find them, to woo them, and to make sure that the community is right for them. We're crafting the class. So whether we're undergraduate, graduate, targeted programs, limited access programs, we're really the ones who are the public face of setting what the university wants to be. So just about everything that we do touches upon students and touches upon the student experience. In terms of working with our student affairs peers, I've had different experiences at every university that I've been at. I worked at Adelphi, where I didn't even know that student affairs existed. We were very siloed, And student affairs was strictly their students, they do their own thing. We were pre-enrollee, so we did our own thing. There was no crossover. When I was at Baruch, I was working in undergrad admissions and also no interaction with student affairs. So student affairs, I don't know where they were, who worked there, but I was just strictly undergrad admissions. That was it. When I moved over to Hofstra and working in graduate admissions tends to be a much smaller team. So a lot more gets done in each office. So we were doing some of the student affairs stuff ourselves. We were doing student registration for first-time students. We were doing, as I said before, the I-20 processing and some visa counseling with new students. We were working with the registrar, with the bursar, with all sorts of other departments trying to get students into the school. We would attend orientation, and then at orientation, that was the very clear, we're passing you on. So now you become student affairs students instead of admission students. And then here I am at Columbia School of Professional Studies. I'm actually part of the Division of Student Affairs. So everything I do is pretty much hand in hand with my counterpart on the advising team and my counterpart on the marketing team. There is nothing that we do where we're not all talking about the outcomes. I launched a CRM, a customer resource management system. So a new application, it's a system called Slate. Well, 2 years after we did that, the advising team said, oh, hey, can we take a look? Can we see what that's like? So we brought what worked for us with an application system into something where the advising team would be able to take our information, student enrolls, we pass add drop, we do a data dump from our Slate system into their Slate system. And now everything that we've worked on and everything we've collected seamlessly transitions over to being able to help the student through the end of their career at Columbia. So it's just really nice to be able to be a part of the student affairs team without really having to do the student affairs stuff. Everybody tends to find their niche within higher ed based on who they are, what they like to do. So we can be aligned with them without having to actually be them.
Thanks, Michelle. It's a great little transition for us too. So what I was going to ask you all now is to actually make a pitch to the students who are here tonight to come work in positions outside of student affairs. So how would you pitch that to folks here? Anyone can jump on in here.
So I'm happy to kick it off. What I would say is that there are just, especially if you're at a larger university, numerous diverse opportunities across functions that could allow you to apply your skills and passions for the benefit of the institution. So lots of options for growth and development across different units, different divisions, etc. Number one. Number two, I will say that in my experience, often in sort of traditional student affairs functions, what you'll see is an aging out, which is to say that at a certain point in someone's life, they may not want to be, for example, on call, or may not want to be living in a dorm, or may not want to have the grind of constant sort of evening and weekend activities. And roles in other functions provide, I think, often a better work-life balance, which is interesting and important as we age. And then last point I would make, and you know, this is the 10 years on Wall Street in me. Often other kinds of roles at universities compensate better. So that's certainly true in the development space, but in other spaces as well, the compensation is just frequently, not always, more generous outside of traditional student affairs functions. And, you know, let's be honest, as we all live our lives and nurture families and age and care for parents and all of that good stuff, compensation matters. I mean, nobody's getting rich in higher ed. For the most part, but it can be an opportunity for slightly more generous compensation with slightly better work conditions in terms of work life.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Looks like Hazel has some thoughts, but I will just say, Andrew, there are some folks who are CEOs at some of these for-profit colleges that are definitely getting rich in higher ed, but for the most part, we aren't. So, yeah, Hazel.
Yeah, I mean, I think Andrew said it well. I don't want to take too much time because I'd really love to hear from the folks in the program and hear their questions. But one thing I would add, and this kind of circle back a little bit to the research that I'm doing in my doctoral program. And I see a lot of women on the screen this evening. Women and women of color are overrepresented in student affairs and terribly underrepresented in other areas, especially advancement fundraising, alumni relations, finance, as in any industry. You know, in just about every area of higher ed, with the exception of student affairs. So, you know, I'm a big advocate for diversity in leadership. I think as our student body becomes more diverse, our leadership is not following that. Our leadership does not look like our students, and it needs to. So I would put a little bit of a pitch that way, in that we need to see folks around the table that have different perspectives.
Thank you very much, Hazel. Important points. Gary, did you want to jump in? I see you're unmuted.
I guess nothing. I guess one way to pitch it would be that this job is actually rewarding, but it's not just monetary. I think I get a lot of pleasure just from knowing that it's changing the life course of not just the student, but their family. And eventually it goes on for generation after generation. So this actually, for me, is a very rewarding job, and it's just not monetary. And sometimes you just don't notice how much you're actually changing, how many different people you're actually changing, just by having just one student go into college and just complete the degree. Even in the case if they don't complete the degree, just the fact that they went in, then they're able to navigate the system, because the system is very difficult to navigate, especially for the first generation students. So if you have just one person that's able to navigate the system, that pays a huge dividend for, I guess, 2 or 3 generations from there. So that's one thing that I have to mention.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. You know, before we're going to try to turn to questions from the students very, very quickly, but I wanted to wrap up with one last question of my own for you all, and maybe Michelle, you could kick us off here. You know, as folks who are sitting in this room today, many of them are charting their course, right? Many of them have just started this graduate program. Some are a bit further along, and I'm wondering what specific advice the 4 of you all have for our audience tonight as they do chart their paths through this field.
Yeah, I would definitely say, as someone who came up through admissions, being a higher ed lifer, but trying a few different schools, trying a few different specific areas of admissions, don't be afraid to try different things. Just because maybe you get one job or you're working at one school and you're thinking, I'm exhausted every day, or these students are not making me happy. I want to be excited for them and I don't like them, which happens. You may end up in an area or in a community where it's not the right fit for you. Don't let that beat you down, and don't feel like, well, I started this, so I have to stick it out. You don't have to stick it out. People move around all the time. And one thing that I really love and respect about my current department is we constantly talk to people about professional growth, professional development, and cross-training. So always be open to different opportunities. Always think about, well, okay, if I'm doing this, there's absolutely nothing wrong with collaborating with someone from a completely different area. I mean, psych major who started off being a tour guide, and now I'm running the application system. how did that happen? Just an opportunity arose. I said, hey, that could be fun. And then my career pivoted. So always be open to pivots, always be open to new opportunities, changing schools, changing departments, and really finding your people and your right fit.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Gary, do you want to jump in?
I guess just to piggyback on what Michelle said, just I guess be open and just try to find something out of your comfort zone. I think oftentimes what happens is that we, I guess the first step would be find a mentor. That's the first thing that I would actually ask students that are currently in the graduate program. And then when they're already working out in the field, after a couple of years, you just become so comfortable that your job just becomes second nature. So I think at that point, just go to training sessions and try to get out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of us, some of us even here, to stay in your profession or in your position for a prolonged amount of time, and there's no growth. So I think that just getting out of your comfort zone would be ideal once you're already in the work world. Right now, find a mentor. I think that it just pays a huge dividend. These are people that will most likely, they will write your letter of recommendation when you go on to a doctoral program. So they're needed.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, Hazel, I see you're unmuted.
I agree with everything that Gary and Michelle said. I think one thing that surprised me when I moved into higher education was how willing folks are to collaborate and how willing folks are to share information. I mean, I would say do it now. If there's a position that you know ultimately at some point you might want to have, go on LinkedIn and find someone that has that role and say, hey, I'm in a master's in higher ed program. Do you have 30 minutes to chat with me about your experience? And I would almost bet money that they would respond and be happy to have a conversation with you. And it is such a small world. You know, you are going to come across people from your program. They're all going to branch out and end up at different institutions and in different roles. And it becomes such a small world that through the years, you're going to come across people again. So for good or for bad, keep that in mind. And then to Michelle's point about moving institutions, I swore I was not taking the job at Colgate. You couldn't tell me that there was any way that I was going to move to Central New York where it's cold and dark most of the year. But it has been a phenomenal opportunity for me. So don't rule anything out, even if it means packing more winter clothes.
Or less, depending on where you're moving. Yeah, Andrew?
Ditto to everything that's been said. Couple of other just real quick points. Use the alumni network. So when you're trolling those LinkedIn profiles, feel free to start with us for those requests for 30-minute calls or conversations. You are right now, because you're enrolled in the program, taking advantage of a tremendous professional development opportunity. But one thing to bear in mind is continue to take advantage of those professional development and training opportunities as they present themselves beyond your master's degree. So there's just a ton of free content out there. And I think this sector does a really good job of encouraging lifelong learning. 3, if you're not already doing it, read the higher ed press. Sign up for the free emails every morning from the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed and Higher Ed Dive, if for no other reason than they will give you talking points in interviews. And then lastly, and this was really important for me as I made a transition into higher ed after finance and philanthropy, read job descriptions that you think you may not be interested in. So, you know, we all get the higher ed jobs blast, or we're looking on institutional websites, HR job opportunity websites. And sometimes we can fall into the rhythm of only looking at things where the job title looks perfect, but you will learn a lot by clicking into other roles. And, you know, in the spirit of suggestions from my colleagues on the panel, be creative and be bold about the ones that you think you might want to go for if you think you have a shot, because you will learn something just by virtue of putting yourself out there.
I started talking and was muted. Thank you all for that really thoughtful advice. Some new ideas there that I think will really push our students. So what I'd like to do now is actually open up the floor to our students. We have a lot of questions that folks actually asked ahead of the event, but I want to privilege the students who are here and who may raise their hand to ask any questions. So I invite folks now to raise your hand and we'll call upon you. If you're not in a place where you feel like you can actually raise your hand and speak out, certainly feel free to use the chat as well if you have any questions. Yeah, go for it, Carson. Thanks for starting us off.
Yeah, I was curious about the panelists, your capstone projects, and specifically if there's any correlation between that and your current role, or maybe your role right after school, and also if there is a connection there, how you kind of used your capstone as like a marketing, or I don't know, like, within the job interview, did it ever come up? And if it did, how did you platform that?
So I think I graduated in June of 2015. I think I was the last cohort to not have a capstone. So the capstone is a relatively newer innovation. I hope I'm not misspeaking there, but I did do 2 papers, big papers in classes. One was the research methods class, and the other was the finance class that I have talked about in interviews. So it gives you something practical and scholarly, and it's just good content to repurpose as you continue and progress through your career.
Thank goodness Andrew said that, because I was looking through my files because I could not remember. I graduated in 2010 and I was like, oh my God, I don't remember what I did. So thank you, Andrew, for saying that we didn't do one. I would say, and maybe the faculty should close their ears for a moment. I don't remember, thank you. I don't remember ever being asked about an assignment per se, as opposed to needing the context and content of the courses, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, perhaps if and when you pursue a doctoral degree, there may be some content there, or there may be something that you might be so passionate about that you want to build off of. And that actually is advisable, because you have somewhere to start, rather than walking into a doctoral program and going, I have no idea what I want to study. But beyond that, really just take it in. And I would say focus less on the assignment itself. Y'all didn't hear me say that though.
You don't know what the assignment is, though, so
yeah.
Unless it's
actually,
Gary?
Actually, I guess I'm part of the cohort that did have to do a capstone, but actually my capstone, there were different ways to do it. They gave you 2 options. My option, what I did was actually, it was about data and institutional research. So mine actually, I have used it, and because I do use a lot of data sets in my current job. So my current function, one of my current functions is actually projecting actually students in courses. So in that case, I do use it. Regarding it coming up as a question, the person that interviewed me wasn't great at math. So that person was just happy to have someone that knew about data and was able to make data informed decisions. I think that's what actually led me, or that was one of the key points in which the reason for me being hired, I think. But just the fact that I knew about data sets and how to manipulate them, that helped me a lot. So I guess in my case, it did work. It did help.
And I didn't have a capstone project formally. I graduated in 2012, but we had a course where it was sort of an unofficial capstone. where we worked together in a group to create a fake university. And we each took a director of or VP of various areas. And then we had to do different projects throughout the year on this imaginary university from our role. And because my entire group, we were all working in higher ed at the time, we all had several years under our belt. So we were actually using our jobs as the project. And because we already had the work experience, I think I'm still in touch with the people from the group, and none of us have ever really been asked about what we did in the higher ed program. It was just, oh, okay, cool. You have all this work experience and you have a master's. So I think it's a little different if you all are currently working in higher ed. The way that you position the master's will be a little bit different than if you're trying to break into the industry.
Thank you all. Are there other questions that folks have? And while we wait for our next hand, I will share a website with our alum and with our first year students or our non-capstone students to actually see what the capstone looks like today. But as of last spring, we started having students conduct a literature review on a topic of their choice and then build a resource manual to support a specific group with some task related to higher ed. So there's a whole set of resources that's going to be growing over the years here. Our current capstone students are taking on some wonderful projects. I see some of you all here tonight. So, while we wait for other student hands, there were a whole bunch of questions that people asked ahead of time relating to pursuing a doctoral degree. And a number of you are, well, Hazel, you're in the middle, or Hazel and Andrew, you're both in the middle of doctoral programs right now. Gary, you mentioned a doctoral degree as well a little while ago. And so I'm wondering if the three of you or all four of you might share your perspectives on the role of doctoral education in the field and in advancing yourselves through the field.
I mean, I would say it would never hurt. I think regardless of what discipline within higher ed, whether it's student affairs or, outside of student affairs, especially if you aspire to a senior leadership position, which then it almost becomes a requirement. But it is not for, you have to know you want it. Andrew's nodding. It is not for the faint of heart, especially if you're working. So if it is the path that you want to go, having an idea of what you want to study at the onset is going to be really helpful. And being very disciplined. It doesn't go to the folks that are the smartest. It's really the most disciplined to be able to make it through. Again, just my opinion there.
Yeah, totally agree. And especially the second part around having a research question that you are passionate about, because it will be your life for several years. And you need to love it because you will come very close to hating it.
Just out of curiosity, the two of you are pursuing PhDs, not EDDs? And do you have a perspective on? Yeah,
I'm in an EDD program.
Yeah, and I'm a PhD program.
And do you all have a perspective on sort of the value of those and the different directions you're taking there in terms of your roles in higher ed administration?
I'll let Andrew go first. I'm a bit cynical.
I mean, it can vary from institution to institution. Number one, in general, PhDs are designed for people who want to teach and research full-time, where EDDs are more practice-focused, but those are not perfect. The line is not right between those two. EDDs tend to be a little shorter and designed for working professionals, but again, that's not a hard and fast rule. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think the differentiation becomes more apparent if you're at a particular type of institution. I think for better or for worse, higher education is very hierarchical, and certain places will recognize a difference there. I would also add one thing that we didn't mention is the expense. If you can find an institution that will support you to pay for it, that is key as well. Because it is incredibly expensive, whichever way, whether full-time, part-time, whatever it is, it's going to have a big financial commitment for you. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Gary, I know you had mentioned the pathway as well. I don't know if you have perspective there. And I see Michelle shared her opinions and viewpoint and personal experience in the chat already.
I'm not in an EDD program, but I will be applying to an EDD program. It's also my understanding that I think Baruch College is considering an EDD program probably 2 years down the line. I spoke to Professor Ryan earlier, or Dean Ryan earlier this semester.
That is correct. Yeah. More to come on that front. We're working on it and working quite hard on it at the moment, actually. So,
yeah, and if you need any information from us, I think that would definitely, you could count on us, and I believe the members of this panel would help.
Thank you. I appreciate that quite a bit. Yeah. And everyone here, you all now know that you have a group of folks who have considered or are in the process of doctoral education who you can all reach out to through LinkedIn or other places as well. So I have a number of questions that I can ask, but I do want to make sure that if there are students in the room who have pressing questions, I create space for that first. I was originally trained as a secondary school educator, so I'm very good at waiting for 7 seconds before moving forward. So one of the questions that appeared up in our questions from folks ahead of time was, in light of the evolving landscape in higher education, what are key things that new professionals should keep in mind?
Always be nimble. You never know when something's going to change. You never know what problems are going to come up, what new opportunities are going to come up. If you had asked me a year ago if I thought that I would be looking for application fraud because of AI and ChatGPT, didn't see that one coming. If you had asked me 5 years ago if I thought that people faking video essays on an application would be my biggest pain point, nope, didn't think that would be the case. If you had asked me 6 months ago if I thought that I would have to completely rebuild an application because of the Supreme Court, nope, didn't see that one coming either. So there's always something that's going to just appear. If you're working with international students, you never know year to year, month to month, week to week, what country is going to have what visa issues, what students are going to have access to money issues, what students might either get stuck in the US or might get stuck not in the US. And how will that affect your cohort, your other students, your faculty, your university? So there could always be something, always be ready for the unexpected.
I think I would say as quickly as the world moves around us, higher ed still moves a little slower in certain regards. Not to say that, you know, the good points that Michelle made about AI and affirmative action and all of these things haven't upended us. But I think entering as a new professional, and maybe because I came from corporate, it was difficult for me to understand why everything took so long, right? Like, why are there so many meetings around X? Why can't we just fix it? Why can't we just, we know what's wrong, fix it, right? And I think that can get frustrating when you're early in your career and you feel like you see something that's so blatant and why does no one else see it? I think, you know, and a good point that Jasmine, or a question that Jasmine put in the chat about, you know, the program. I remember Professor McGarrigy and the history of higher education course was foundational into me really wanting to stay in higher ed. And looking at, you know, the 400 or 500 years of education in this country and how what we're experiencing today has been influenced by the past. So kind of two questions in one. I think differently during the program, you know, take it all in. Again, I go back to something I said earlier, because it really is cyclical and it really does still impact what you're experiencing in your career today.
Yeah, and I would just add with respect to the program, I mean, I loved the program. So please don't hear this as an expression of regret at all. And Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong here, to the degree that you can choose electives, be thoughtful about the electives that you choose. For me, it was very much a function of what was available, what was online, what would allow me to complete the degree as quickly as possible. And, you know, there are one or two electives that were offered during the time that I was a student that I wish I had taken. One on collective bargaining, that now that I'm in a, you know, big flagship land grant university where everything is unionized except for the foundation, would have been really, really helpful. So that would be my only, and when I was going through the program, 3 of the 10 classes could be electives. So just be thoughtful about which ones those are.
If you'd like to come to my class next week, Andrew, the president of the PSC CUNY is going to be our guest speaker. I'll send you the invite. So I know, Hazel, you started responding, and so did you, Jasmine, or to Andrew, to Jasmine's question. I'll read it aloud for Michelle and Gary in case you didn't see it. But Jasmine asked if you would have done something differently during your time as a student in this program, what would it have been? So I don't know if Michelle or Gary have anything to add there.
I guess just I would have gotten involved in things a lot earlier. I think now you guys have a really great mentoring program. I guess it's much more robust than it was when I was there. So I guess getting involved with mentors, and I can't stress that enough. I think mentors are very important, and these people will be lifelong friends. So I think that it's very important to have a mentor on your side.
Yeah, and I think my experience was so different from the rest of the panelists because I was already working in higher ed. I was working at Baruch. I literally just went across the street to go to my class. And I went into it with the admissions mindset of what do I want out of this? So I went in knowing this is what I'm going to do. These are the courses that I want to take. This is how I'm going to structure my education. And when I was looking at courses, I would look at the required classes first to make sure that I wouldn't get stuck with not being able to get all my classes in the 2 years that I needed to complete the program part-time. So let's get through the required first, then if I have room in my schedule, then I can play with my electives. So the electives were, whatever happened, kind of happened. But I knew any of my projects were going to be tangible for me. I was going to tie them back to my job. I was going to take whatever I was learning in the classroom and tie it to what I was doing. So for me, very different experience. I don't have any regrets with how I went through the program, the courses I took. Professor McGarrigy, I miss that man. I just wanted to crawl inside of his head and exist in his brain. He was one of the most intelligent and one of the most interesting men I have ever met in my life. And he really made the program when I was a part of it.
Thanks, Michelle. I believe we have one question. Somebody was shooting me a private message. I don't know if you'd like to. Great, go for it, Suzanne.
Sure. I'm always curious about professional associations where, we encourage students to join them. There's often student memberships. And I'm curious for the panelists, which ones do you find most helpful for your either functional areas or non-functional areas? Which are you most active in, if you are active?
I think CASE, CASE, I forget what the whole thing stands for communication and advancement, alumni relations, is probably the one that I think of most quickly. Yeah. Thank you, Andrew.
And the other one that we're pretty active in is AGB, which is the Association of Governing Boards. That is really pitched more at kind of a trustee level, but there are tons of really interesting resources about how higher ed is governed that are just fascinating. And when you are at a point in your career where you begin to work with trustees and board members, volunteer leadership of any kind, advisory board members, that kind of stuff is super valuable.
And I just dropped a bunch in the chat. These are the ones that I've found most helpful throughout my career, either for myself or for my peers. And most of these have regional conferences as well as the nationals. So NAFSA, largest international group, I think, in the world, they have 10,000 attendees, and those conferences can be incredibly overwhelming. And the flip side to that is NAGAP will have maybe 600 people at their annual conference. And NASPA has regional events where some of my colleagues on the advising team, they've presented just in the New York regional.
And Gary, do you want to share what AIR is?
Yeah, it's the Association for Institutional Research. So it delves a lot into data-informed decision making. So anyone that's interested in, I guess, data and how it works, that's the key institution. And they, as person before me just said, they do have national and actually local conferences. They're based in Tallahassee, Florida.
Thanks, Gary. Also, for folks who are interested in AIR, they have some incredible resources on their website, some really useful publications in terms of doing institutional research that I highly recommend. Hazel, do you want to speak about NCORE and any others for a moment?
Yeah, NCORE kind of crosses disciplines a bit. It's student affairs as well as DEI equity, but it also a little bit of communication. So it might, if that's an area that folks are interested in, it's a pretty good group.
And if you don't mind me asking, thank you for sharing all these. I'm wondering, though, if you could all speak a little bit about how being part of these organizations may have helped your careers and any advice you have relating to these kinds of professional associations for our students.
I mean, I actually think the biggest part of it is the networking. To have higher ed professionals from all institution types in one room. Yeah, of course, they all have panels, they all have magazines or e-newsletters, etc. But the opportunity, whether it's virtually connecting with members or at a conference like AMA Chicago in November, but that's another. I think just again, it's a small space. Higher ed is a very small, connected industry, and being able to connect with folks is a really good it's a really good way to grow your network and learn about opportunities.
When I was early in my career, I would go to conferences to learn. I would go to conferences to go to the panels and take all the notes and take back information to my team. And as I've grown and as I've continued on through my career, I'm now on the panels. I I try to present every year if possible. I've done a few different panels at NAGAP. I presented at the Slate Summit this past year, so on our computer system, and how we've used that to make enrollment predictions. So taking what I've learned on the job and what I'm doing on the job, bringing that to others to help and to give back a bit. And a number of my LinkedIn connections are people who were at those presentations, or I gave one presentation and the next year somebody reached out and said, hey, I really liked what you said, what you were doing last year. Would you like to join a new panel? So just taking what I took in early on and giving it back out now.
One of the great things about AIR is that they do have training sessions, and these are free specifically for students that are interested in data analytics. They do have training sessions. And the membership for students, it's not expensive. So I think that's one pitch for AIR.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, make sure if you are joining these organizations, folks, that you are looking to see what the student rate is, because you can often get highly discounted rate. So yeah. Are there any other questions from folks who are here? Okay, so with that, I think what I'll do is just ask our panelists if they have any parting thoughts that they'd like to share, and then we can wrap things up for the evening.
You know, I would just say this is a great sector to build a career in. And if my experience is any indication, you will leave this program phenomenally well prepared to do a range of interesting things. So best of luck and use your alumni.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other?
This is actually, I thank you for the opportunity, and this is actually a great program. It has helped me a lot with networking, and I one thing that I would say to students is just the person next to you is the person that will most likely get you your job. So you guys need to network with one another. This is just so important. The person that's sitting right next to you is going to most likely call upon you one day to exchange numbers, exchange emails, and the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I would, echo what Andrew and Gary have said. I really enjoyed my time in the higher ed program at Baruch. And, all of the same things about networking. And then I would say, your path doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be, a prescribed journey that, the person next to you or what you thought your journey was going to be. Take it all in and just stay open for other possibilities.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Michelle?
I think everyone really hit the nail on the head. Just enjoy the program. It is a well-regarded program. I've hired multiple alums from this program into various positions at a couple different universities. Out of all the higher ed programs in our area, hiring managers know this one, and hiring managers respect this one. So you made a really good choice. Take advantage of everything you can, and good luck.
Thank you all so much. I'm so grateful for you being part of this and for being part of the alumni community. I know that our students are grateful for tonight, and I suspect you'll all be hearing from a number of them in the future. So I thank you in advance for that too. And if there's ever anything that we can do as faculty here, I am more than happy to do that. And I suspect you'll probably be hearing from us again in the future with some more requests to help out. So thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. And thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful night, everyone.